international best-selling author Dennis Covier about his book, Stop Spending Money on Your People and How to Turn HR into a Profit Center. Thanks so much for being here today, Dennis.
My pleasure. Good to be with you.
Thank you. So I want to talk about the core message of your book, starting off. What do you mean by saying companies need to start investing in their people rather than simply spending money on their people?
Yeah, I guess it's really a mindset, and I tried to have a little bit of levity with the title, Stop Spending Money on Your People, but Start Investing. And the concept is how to look at the HR as a function to be more of a profit driver, more of a profit center for the organization. The idea is this. You know, whether you're a startup business or you're a small business and you're moving forward, what we find is that a lot of senior leaders don't have necessarily formal training in HR, and they know that people are important. They know that the people are the lifeblood of their business. Intuitively, they know this, but they don't necessarily have the right mechanisms to measure what's the return on investment through training, development, motivational approaches or whatever. So we come to them with these ideas and they're going, will I get the return on investment, or is is HR this black hole that I just keep throwing money down? So the core focus of the book is first of all to understand that we have to stop spending money. We have to start investing. And as soon as we say investing, it's like your own personal investment, the RSPs. There's an implied rate of return. Now, one thing I know about entrepreneurs is even when the money is tight, if they feel it's a wise investment, they'll go get the money. So part of it is how do we make sure in lean times that we're getting that proper return on investment, that we know how to measure it, and that we're getting all of our people to think in these terms, that we're just not going to throw money down this hole, but we're actually expecting an effective rate of return.
So let's talk specifically about startups. How do you suggest CEOs go about attracting new employees to becoming a part of their team? And not only that, but how can they gauge the applicant's genuine interest in an interview?
Well, that's a great question. It entails so many things. I would say the starting point is it's like the analogy I give. Take, for example, a champion archer. They have a great bow, an arrow, a wonderful attitude, but just before they go and shoot the arrow, somebody blindfolded them and spun them around. Well, with this crazy scenario, the probability of this champion hitting the target is very, very low. So what do I mean by this? Well, from a business perspective, this is where a job description becomes so important. And I'm not talking about a formalized job description that has to be 5 pages long. Even if you just write something on the back of a napkin, ask yourself, what is the essence of the job? What's the core skills, competencies, and attitudes? Because unless you can neatly identify what the target looks like, you're not likely to hit it. One of the great techniques I can share with your viewers that were very, very helpful on this is I call this the ABC's approach. In other words, write down, when you look at all the core criteria, all the behaviors, all the competencies and attitudes that you're looking for, once you've got that list down, ask yourself, what are the A's, the absolute critical items? What are the B's that are beneficial, and what are the C's that are convenient? If the person that you're looking at doesn't possess your minimum absolute, keep on looking. What my experience tells me is that no amount of training and development will ever turn that person into a superstar. Now, if you have a person that possesses all the absolutes, then you look at how many B's and C's they have, and that makes them a strong candidate to invite to the interview.
So on page 82, you talk about barriers to effective communication for an interviewer. But what kind of communication mistakes are commonly made between CEOs and their staff on a day-to-day basis?
Well, there's a couple of things. One of them, for example, is assumptions. Sometimes, as a CEO, you know the big picture, you know the vision, you know exactly where you want the organization to go. Here's the question. Have you truly communicated that vision, that big picture to every single member of your team? See, oftentimes we make the dangerous and erroneous assumption that everybody knows where we're going. And then people, because we're all so busy, they're running around doing everything they can on a day-to-day basis, but their micro activities are not connected with the macro picture. That's why it's so important to re-communicate on an ongoing basis the vision, the big picture, where we're going, so that people feel, first of all, connected. They see how they fit in with the big picture, but also so we don't make so many costly errors and mistakes. The second thing, it's really about feedback. One of the things I know to be true is that human beings around the world crave feedback. I'm not talking about big trophies and awards. The sincere pat in the back, job well done. One of the realities is a lot of CEOs operate with the mindset is that no news is good news. In other words, if you don't hear anything from me, everything's fine. Well, the reality is that peak performers work exceedingly hard, but they like to get some acknowledgement. And it's not about babying people. It's just about stopping, taking a moment, and giving some genuine feedback. In fact, I have a slogan that I like to share with you that I find is very, very powerful as a form of communications, and that is that we should praise our people publicly, but we should criticize privately.
So lastly, Dennis, we understand now that the whole premise of your book is how to put your HR department into a profit center. So can you give us an example of a company who is using this model effectively?
Oh, absolutely. I was working with a meat production plant out in Alberta, and their mindset used to be that HR was really that hole that you would just dump money. What was happening is with the meat production plant, there was an extremely high level of staff turnover on the production floor itself. This is the actual meat cutters on the production floor. In fact, 68% of the production staff actually had turned over. Now, 68% out of a total production staff on the floor of 800 people actually resulted in 544 people that had left that position and had to be replaced over a one-year period. Now, when you look at the costs involved in recruiting the replacements, selecting these people, training, developing all the new replacements, it was on an average of $2,440 per person. Multiply that out, Allison, by the 544 people for that yearly period, it represented $1.3 million. So collectively, we came up with some ideas. And what we did, first of all, is working with the HR people, I actually did a comprehensive survey. And I wanted to find out through surveying existing people, plus doing exit interviews and looking at former employees, where the challenges were. And what we found out, this was very illuminating, that 95% of all the employee turnover happened within the first 30 days. In other words, they would hire somebody, in all probability that person wouldn't work out and they were out the door. We replaced them, that person was back out the door. So why? We had to ask ourselves, why was this happening? Well, there was a number of reasons. Number one, there was no onboarding program whatsoever. Also, the morale on the lines was very bad. A lot of people attributed this to the supervisors. Now, what happened was there was a policy, if you will, of promote from within, which is a good thing, but they didn't actually vet who would be the best people to take off the shop floor and put into the role of supervisor. So one of the things we did is we said, okay, from now on, we're actually going to have some sort of an assessment mechanism to determine who actually wants to be a supervisor, who has the core attitudes and attributes and is coachable to develop into that role. And then we created an entire train the supervisor program, and we insisted that every single supervisor had to go through it. Plus, we created this whole onboarding program. So after investment and it cost, it was an investment of $92,000 to do all this work. That translated to only 88 people leaving at the $2,440, which was a cost of about $214,000. So when we factor in the actual investment of the $92,000, the net savings to the company was $1.1 million. So with their mindset shift, and with some support with myself and working with the team internally, they actually had a tracked return of investment using their numbers. For every dollar they invested, they got $12 net back to the bottom line. This is one of dozens of companies that I've worked with that have taken this information very seriously, have had some sort of a cultural change, and have embraced these new systems and have been enjoying the net profits ever since.
Wow. Well, thank you so much for being here today, Dennis. You've definitely given us a new perspective on HR.
It's been my pleasure. Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you. For more information on how you can start investing in your people, go to Cadela.com.